So we're going to lean on some science from a paper titled Debunking the Vegan Myth, the case for a plant-forward omnivorous whole foods diet, that was published very recently in the journal Progress in Cardiovascular Diseases by prominent authors like Lauren Cordain and James O'Keefe. And they go into the many health risks that are linked with a vegan or vegetarian diet. There are known health consequences when you go on a vegan or vegetarian diets that I think many people that for social or societal influences trend towards going vegan or vegetarian are not aware of. And let's talk about some of these, including depression and anxiety. This is something that we see so much in our culture today. Suicides, drug overdoses. We have people now, I think it's like 30% of postmenopausal women are on psychiatric medications, Prozac, Effexor, and the like. We know kids are now taking polypharmacy when it comes to amphetamines and antidepressants. And we know that more and more people are plant-based than ever, at least here in the West. And so it's important to recognize there is a strong scientific and academically studied, from a research standpoint, an association with mental health issues in going on a vegan or vegetarian diet. And as you can see here in figure 2, that is elucidated by why. The micronutrient deficiencies like omega-3 fatty acid deficiencies and zinc deficiencies. Hair loss. I see more and more people now with thinning or balding hair in both men and women. We know that protein deficiencies, zinc deficiencies, and iron deficiencies, among others, like silica, for example, lead to hair loss. And also the hormonal changes due to insulin resistance that are more common in vegan or vegetarians can lead to changes in hair loss and exacerbate that, particularly for women in the case of PCOS. We know there's also skin issues from zinc deficiencies and protein deficiencies like dermatitis that is figured here in figure 2A. Hypothyroidism. I mean, this is so common in our culture, unfortunately, especially again in women. And more women, there's 2 times more women that go vegan or vegetarian compared to men. And we see hypothyroidism is very common amongst vegans and vegetarians. Why? Probably selenium deficiency and also iodine deficiency. And this is important one important point that we need to really expand upon here is sarcopenia, loss of muscle mass. Often when you go to a grocery store, you see people that are buying clearly on a plant-based diet, plant-based chips, plant-based cookies. They might have some fruit and veggies in their shopping cart, but oftentimes there's a lot of cookies, crackers, treats, and bread products. Well, we know those are devoid of protein. We know protein is so important for maintaining skeletal muscle mass, improving muscle protein synthesis. We've talked at length about this with Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, Dr. Sean Baker, Alan Argon. We've spoken a lot about the importance of prioritizing protein to help support muscle protein synthesis. But if you're not getting adequate protein or insufficient amino acids, such as leucine, isoleucine, valine, and essential amino acids that are not present in plants, you're going to have impairments in muscle protein synthesis, even if you're resistance training. And last but not least, the 2 major additional health risks linked with vegan and vegetarian diets are osteoporosis and bone fractures due to vitamin D insufficiency and calcium insufficiencies, as well as various anemias due to iron deficiency, as well as B12 deficiencies. I will throw in there, we know that creatine is a conditionally essential nutrient. We know that about 17% of Americans consume no creatine whatsoever. Why is that? Because creatine is found in animal-based products. It's found in breast milk. It's found in red meat, a little bit in chicken. The highest source of creatine, if you want to ingest herring, actually. Herring has 11 grams of creatine per kilogram of raw herring. So that's the greatest source. Grass-fed beef, for example, would have between 5 and 6 grams of creatine per kilogram. So even if you're eating a pound of red meat per day, you may be only getting about 2.5 grams of creatine. So let's talk a little bit more about the big push towards a vegan or vegetarian diets from our medical institutions, including the American College of Cardiology, the American Heart Association, and more. In their 2019 guidelines on the primary prevention of cardiovascular disease endorsed a plant-based diet. And the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics stated that an appropriately planned vegan diet is healthful and nutritionally adequate and may provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of chronic diseases. And they say that it's appropriate for all stages of the life cycle, which I think is irresponsible, almost public health malpractice, because we know that DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. This is an omega-3 fat that is really critically important for brain development. If you're eating a vegan or vegetarian diet, mom and dad are eating that way, and there's insufficient levels of this critically important long-chain omega-3 fat that is important for helping babies' brains develop and improving cognition and focus and reducing the prevalence of ADD and ADHD and possibly even autism, that is not a good thing. Also, we know that iodine is going to be void, as we talked about, in a vegan or vegetarian diet. So I think there's a lot more nuance that is lacking from our health institutions that is influencing people to go vegan or vegetarian diet. But even as the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics say, a lot of folks are not appropriately planning their vegan or vegetarian diets. And I will tell you that even when I did short, 2 or 3 month stints on a vegan or vegetarian diet that was appropriately planned, soaking and sprouting nuts and seeds and grains and making sure that things are fermented and doing the like, I found a lot of gastrointestinal side effects and consequences. And when you hang out or socialize with vegans or vegetarians, they're open and honest about their digestive issues, burping, gassing, bloating, and the consequences of this, because humans are in between. We're omnivores. We're in between carnivores and herbivores in terms of our anatomical features and the morphology of our gastrointestinal tract. And so the toxic features of the standard American diet that cause obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and shortened life expectancy would not be averted by simply excluding animal-based foods. Rather, by reducing the intake of highly processed refined carbohydrates, deep fried foods, processed meats, and sweetened beverages that are ubiquitous in our culture. Again, the micronutrient deficiencies that are associated with a vegan or vegetarian diet are linked with neurologic dysfunction, musculoskeletal, also immunological issues, because of zinc deficiency and so forth. And so they recommend that vegans or vegetarians should supplement with B12, with niacin, with vitamin D, with creatine, with other nutrients that are going to be deficient in a vegan or vegetarian diet. And so I think that's important to recognize because these are linked with cognitive impairment, immunologic compromises. We also know that there's increased rates of bone fractures, sarcopenia, depression, and anxiety. And so the specific deficiencies that one should consider if they have a friend or decide to go on a vegan or vegetarian diet, they should supplement with vitamin B12, with zinc, with omega-3 fats, other minerals like selenium, like iodine, and also probably supplement with protein because there's going to be a deficiency in protein like we've talked about. And I think it's important to recognize the incidence of psychiatric diagnosis among 4,181 adults. If you look here in green, and this is for depressive disorders, you see about 35% of people who in this particular data set were diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder. 35% of them identify as vegan. About 27% identify as semi-vegetarian. In contrast, only 21% identify as non-vegetarian. So there's about a 15% swing in the prevalence of major depression. Now, if you look here at anxiety, that disparity is even greater. You have about 35% of people who are diagnosed with anxiety report that they are vegetarian or vegan. In contrast to omnivorous individuals, people eating animal products. It could be processed meat and the like, but it's only about 13%. So that's almost a 20-point swing in the prevalence of anxiety. And we know that mental health issues are on the rise. We have mass shootings, right? We have people committing suicide, overdosing from drugs, reporting that they just don't feel well. There's fights all the time. There's viral videos of people fighting in the streets and at schools. I mean, this is like ubiquitous in our culture. I think it's important that we start to look at the micronutrient deficiencies, not only in just vegan diets, but also, the standard American diet, because we know that is not healthy as well. And if you look here, the co-occurrence of eating disorders in vegans or vegetarians is much higher compared to non-vegetarians. So that's important to recognize. So we should be looking at eating nose to tail. The micronutrients found in liver and organ meats have collagen and peptides and other micronutrients that are so important for skin, hair health, also eye health, really important. And so it is important to recognize that people who avoid meat have challenges in these departments. An interview with Rich Roll, who's been a prominent vegan activist for a long time. He's a former attorney. He was addicted to alcohol and fast food in this, and he was a college swimmer, and he went plant-based and has created a lot of sensation around going plant-based. But he did an interview with Dr. Peter Attia. I'll play a clip here just so you can hear. He's reporting in his 50s, he's having a lot of joint pain, a lot of issues. He can barely ride his bike anymore, and he used to be an avid cyclist like myself.
Through my own experience of dealing with lower back pain, suddenly I'm in a position where I can't run without pain. And even if I'm on the bike for more than a couple hours, my back becomes intolerable. I've got an L4 that's kind of out of whack and sciatic pain. So I was like, all right, well, I'll swim. I'll get in the pool. This should be supportive. And I signed up for the Key West 20-kilometer swim, which was just this past weekend with the intention of competing in that. But when the yardage started to stack up around 6,000 or 7,000 yards per workout, like my back just couldn't deal with it. And I don't know if
even was that in open water or with flip turns?
Well, it was flip turns.
Okay,
so so I think it's all the turns.
Yeah.
Like I just couldn't do a flip turn anymore without pain. But I wasn't doing any of the kind of gym work required to be balanced in that regard. And as a result, I have certain atrophies and I have like misalignment in my posture and all sorts of things that, now I'm realizing are super problematic, not the least of which is my balance is terrible. Like if I stand on one foot or I try to put my socks on, things like that, like it's hard. And that was like a huge revelatory moment for me to realize like, there's something terribly awry here.
He's having a lot of issues. And I think we're seeing more and more of that in the community where people are having joint pain and challenges, probably because they're not getting collagen and hydroxycollagen and the different collagen-like peptides from eating a nose to tail animal-based omnivorous style diet. And I think it's hard to make the case for a vegan or vegetarian diet if you're being consistent and honest with the biology, because humans are omnivores. We have enzymes, and the anatomy of our gastrointestinal tract is very similar and is omnivorous in nature. Like carnivores, we have assorted proteases in our gut that are designed specifically to digest animal protein. On the other hand, like herbivores, we have sucrases in our gut that enable us to digest fruits and vegetable matter. We can digest plants and so forth. So the great apes have a dominant colon that is very similar in function to that of ruminants, and that is adapted to ferment and digest bulky plant matter. In contrast, the human gastrointestinal tract is morphologically intermediate between carnivores and herbivores. It's characterized by a dominant small intestine that is effective for digesting both plant and animal-based foods. Humans also have shoulders, arms, and trunks adapted to enable us to accurately throw projectiles like rocks and spears at high velocity to capture animals in order to accommodate the micronutrients that we need to survive. And these unique anatomical endowments were almost certainly selected for their ability to augment hominin hunting prowess.